Hello everybody, 2 years ago I got to drive the original Audi e-Tron, the company's first attempt at a production all-electric car, and it was a disaster. Underwhelming performance, shocking economy, lackluster design and some fairly lazy engineering all combined to make a product that was totally forgettable and simply couldn't justify its very high asking price. Now though, there is another car with the e-Tron name attached to it, and I'm very happy to say this one is a lot better. This is the confusingly named Audi RS E-Tron GT, essentially the four-ring take on the Porsche Taycan Turbo. I've been living with it for a week now, and today I'm going to tell you why this car really could be better than the mighty RS6. Porsche and Audi platform sharing is nothing particularly new. They've been doing it for near 20 years since the introduction of the original Cayenne. However, when it comes to the Taycan and the e-Tron GT, things are particularly confusing. The cheapest version of the base non-RS e-Tron GT is actually £10,000 more than the entry-level Taycan, but it's a higher performing car. At the top end, the model hierarchy is reasonably intact, with the equivalent Audi being just a little bit less than the equivalent Porsche. Further up the food chain and things are a little clearer, with the hierarchy being retained, Porsche always the more expensive model. So your entry-level RS e-Tron GT is around £115,000, and the closest Taycan, the Turbo, is £120,000. This RS e-Tron GT Carbon Black is £135,000, so a little bit cheaper than a Taycan Turbo S, but in terms of specification, like for like, the Audi will always be slightly better value for money. When this car was announced, everybody knew it was going to be a version of the Taycan. However, when the numbers were finally released, I was shocked at just how close Audi were allowed to get to the Porsche. So, the Taycan Turbo makes 625 horsepower, this 598. In overboost, they're still close. The Turbo makes 680 horsepower, this 640. And it's worth noting that it's only in overboost where the Taycan Turbo S actually makes any more power, another 100 horses, but only for 2.5 seconds. So day to day, the Turbo S is simply a better equipped car rather than a better performer. All of these cars have daft 0 to 60 times somewhere in the 3-second range, with the Turbo S being just under thanks to its increased overboost. This makes over 800 Newton meters of torque, that's 600 pound-feet, and weighs 2,350 kilos, which is very heavy, but considerably lighter than the original e-Tron, which was some several hundred kilos more again. Just like in the Porsche, this car has double wishbone suspension up front, multi-link out the back, and charging points on both sides, though frustratingly it's only on the left that you can attach a fast charger, something you'll want to know about if you're pulling up to a charging station. You have a surprisingly useful boot at the front, I would say roughly equivalent in size to a 911, and a very generous boot at the back. Now, one area I think this is far better than the Taycan is in the looks department. The Porsche is certainly much better in person than in photos, however, it's a bit of an awkward duck. I don't really think it knows what it wants to be. This shape suits the current Audi design language down to a T. It's a menacing looking thing, particularly in black. I'm not really so keen on this colour, which they call tactical green, and I call you should probably take your cat to the vet green. Let me know in the comment section if you like it or not, because it really has divided opinion. That aside though, this car really does turn heads, and I don't think it's just because of the divisive colour. Maybe it's because it is a pretty large and imposing car, very wide, very long, and somewhat difficult to park in your average British small town. But it's a good looking car and gets attention, which when you've paid this amount of money, I think some people will expect. If you've been in any Audi recently, the interior of the RS e-Tron GT will feel very familiar, but there are a number of touches in here that for me make it one of the company's best. They include things like the fact that the HVAC panel down here, in recent times a touchscreen setup, has been replaced by one with physical buttons that are very easy on the eye, intuitive, and also high quality feeling. I like that. I also like the fact that when you get in the car, it's just on. So if you want to move away, all you need to do is slip it into drive. And that makes sense. After all, it's an EV. Why should you have to press the start button at all? I'm sure many who've driven EVs recently will have been frustrated by the fact that you're never really quite sure if they're on or not, and this just works. I also love this here. This little disc is your on-off switch for the whole infotainment. It's got a mute, track forwards and backwards, but is also a basic volume control that you operate by swirling your finger on it. That's genius, very easy to use, very clever design, and a way that people have used touch-sensitive things in a sensible manner. VAG, VW, take note. As for the main screen up here, as you may be able to tell by the fingerprints on it, this is still a touchscreen item and no different to you get in, say, the RS6. Same goes for the main driver's dashboard here, which is absolutely fine because though it is now a few years old, this for me is still best in class. This whole setup here is one of the best you'll find in any car, anywhere. It's so elegant, so intuitive, so easy to use. I don't even hold it against Audi that they haven't changed it for a while because, quite frankly, they don't need to. Now, there are some gripes. One is this little cubby hole. In there, you'll find your USB sockets, which annoyingly are C, and also a wireless charging pad for your phone. But this, not big enough to put your phone in. Oh, if you try and put the phone sideways, it's still not big enough. And this is an Oppo Find X5 Pro, which as modern phones go, isn't that massive. That's frustrating. On that end of the dashboard, there's also a very, very large gap, which really doesn't look right at all to me and is very, very un-Audi-like. Over here, this door card and dash do not meet evenly, which is very frustrating. They're out by quite some way. And even more annoyingly, the Bang & Olufsen 3D stereo, which is okay and nothing more, rattles these doors to pieces. Put on just about any music with any amount of bass, and you don't even have to have the settings mucked around with. This thing is terrible. Rattles like an old Citroen, and that I just cannot forgive. If I owned this car, I would be sending it back for rectification. I can't believe it's meant to do that. Just in case you want to experience it for yourself in your RS or normal E-Tron GT, play the Sebastian Bohm version of Blue Monday by New Order. It's off the Wonder Woman 1984 trailer, and it's amazing. Other good news includes the fact that this Alcantara steering wheel can be leather for no cost, and I love these seats. These are what they call the Super Sports Pro seats. The leather quality is decent, they're not spectacular, they are very comfortable, very supportive, they have reasonable adjustment, heating and ventilation in this car, and they're pretty good. Though I can't say the same for the rear. The seats themselves are excellent, very comfortable. This is technically a 5-seater, but in practice a 4-seater, and the rears are sculpted to allow taller passengers. But the combination of the black Alcantara headliner, the black leather, and the very aggressive tints at the rear mean that it's a pretty oppressive place for passengers to be. It's really not nice to spend time in there at all, and that's a great shame. In other markets, by default, there are many, many other colour choices available for the interiors, but here, this is pretty much all you get. The most exciting you can have is red stitching instead of the grey, which you can have as part of the carbon black RS design pack. That's it. Now, of course, this being a German car, we cannot talk about it without discussing the spec. And this is one area that I think Porsche claws back some ground, because for some reason that I cannot fathom, Audi seem to be on a mission to shortchange British customers when it comes to options. If you buy one of these in Germany, you buy it in very much the same way you do a Porsche. So there's your base model, the RS E-Tron GT is €142,000, and you choose your options. Done. Not particularly complicated. Here though, we have trim levels. So you've got the regular car, the carbon black like this, then top of the tree, the Vorsprung. The theory being the Vorsprung gets you everything, the base model gets you less, but you pay less, and the carbon black is kind of the popular middle ground. That's absolutely fine and would make sense if it weren't for the fact that there's an awful lot missing, including many options for the interior, some for the exterior. Case in point, on these in Britain, the RS model, you cannot have a panoramic roof. In Germany, no problem at all. And I question the value of some of these trim levels. So this is the carbon black. It's £15,000 more than the regular E-Tron GT, and it gets you different alloys that look very fussy, needlessly so. Red calipers, some glossy carbon exterior bits, which I'm sure save very little weight except the roof, which is nice and probably is quite expensive. The black pack, so this kind of stuff. The interior RS design pack, which amounts to some contrast stitching, and confusingly here they've gone for grey rather than red. An Alcantara headlining, which is nice, and the Alcantara wheel, which if you like, you can have swapped out for leather. The top trim option on these is the Vorsprung, which is another £10,000, and that gets you all of the stuff you'd expect this to have already had at £130,000. So you get soft closed doors, you get double glazing, you get massage seats. The website confusingly says you also get ventilated seats, but you've got that here already. You also get heads-up display, again, should be standard. This doesn't even have a 360-degree camera. I mean, that's just nuts. That's expected on a £100,000 car. In fact, I think a lot of people expect that on a £50,000 car now. But you do get all of the other options packs thrown in, which this does not have as standard. Happily, this particular press car has just the 3 options to talk about. One is the tactical green paint, one is the tour pack, which gets you adaptive cruise and lane departure stuff and all that sort of thing, and the carbon ceramic brakes, which are just about £5,000, and happily, very, very good. If the Vorsprung had all of that stuff, and you could have the panoramic roof like in Europe, and you could have an even fancier interior and everything else, I would be perfectly satisfied with it, and I'd say Audi are doing it the correct way. But as far as I can see it, here, they're just stiffing people. If you are going to buy one of these, my choice would always be for the Vorsprung, and if you go for that, the only actual option left to choose is the carbon ceramic brakes, that I personally would also have in a car this capable and this heavy. Sadly, in the UK, if you want something truly individual, you're likely going to have to go to Porsche, and that's a real shame because Audi have all the facilities available to offer you all of the customization and personalization you want. In fact, if you go on the Audi.de website, one of the first things they'll tell you about is all the ways you can make the car individual to you. I've been to Neckarsulm, I've seen the room where they do all of these things. It's fantastic, it's wonderful, and if I were to buy one of these, I would beg as much as I could to get Audi to let me go through that process and create a car that was truly special. I think it's really disappointing that at this price point, Audi UK have just decided that what most customers want is a fairly safe, or in this case not so safe, exterior colour, big blinging wheels, black leather and Alcantara interior, and that's about it. The RS6 had this problem. We didn't even get the same toys that the Germans do on the same trim level of car, and that is not right. Audi, please sort it out. Britain spends enough money with you to be treated the same as your other markets. Come on. But I am in a minority here, aren't I? Just about everybody else in Britain appears to be very happy having an Audi that looks just the same as everyone else's. And let's be real, the vast majority of EVs at this price point are being sold to companies on lease deals anyway to take advantage of the many financial incentives that exist still. So, as this is a marginally cheaper car than the Porsche, does it still offer the same performance and, most importantly, the same thrills? Time to find out. Never mind Porsche, I think Tesla has a lot to answer for because thanks to them and admittedly many of my fellow influencers, there are a lot of people out there that think every single electric car is the sort of thing that can absolutely destroy a Dodge Challenger Hellcat on a drag strip, when the truth is many of them are far from that. So what you likely want to know is, does this do the crazily Tesla you'll be in the backseat when you put your foot down thing? Yeah, it does. And that's comfort mode. There are actually only 4 modes to choose from. Efficiency, which seems to be absolutely pointless because it'll still go ludicrously quick. I mean, look, this is efficiency mode, right? All that I can really see it actually doing is limiting your speed to 80, which in Britain doesn't really do much. This is efficiency mode. I wouldn't even mind if it limited the power to sort of 75% or so. As it happens, when the battery starts to get low, gets to the sort of 25% mark, it will very gradually start reining in your peak power. You've then got comfort mode, which I think is brilliant. It's the default mode, and honestly, if the car had nothing else, I wouldn't complain. it still goes like stink. It's actually comfortable. This thing rides really well for something as fast and capable as it is. But then you've got dynamic, that sharpens up the throttle response as if it needed it, does weighten the steering a touch, firms up the suspension, and gives you some fake engine noises as well that don't really sound all that appealing. In fact, with dynamic on, from outside the car has a distant whiff of V8 rumble. Very odd. You've then got individual, which is actually somewhat disappointing because there's very, very little you can actually configure. You've got the drive system, the suspension, which only has 2 options, and the sound. That's it. The RS6 has several different RS modes. You can configure the differential, all sorts of stuff, and you would have thought a bit of a tech fest like a 600 horsepower electric car would have more for you to do, but no. I'm sure there is a way of getting a sort of full-bore Tesla-style launch control out of this thing, but I haven't even gone looking for it because, to be quite honest, it's completely and totally unnecessary. This thing is already ludicrously quick out of junction. Allow me to demonstrate. Just to show off, we're going to have it in individual, which has got drive in sporty. Going to give the traffic a moment to clear. Got nothing behind us, and I'm actually going to be doing the awkward thing and turning right. So this is about as bad as it gets. Main road, I've got some visibility down there, a little bit over there. I need to put my foot down. So 0 mile an hour, individual mode. Okay, and out, and foot is down, 30, 40. There's the speed limit. Oh, that's something, isn't it? That's really something, and you know, it just I took the girlfriend out in this earlier. She says we have to buy one. Here's a more traditional junction exit, so I'm going the correct direction already. Little chirp from the rear tyres, and actually, this does bring me neatly onto a point I have about these things. The kind of performance that this thing delivers is absolutely eye-watering. I recently drove the Kia EV6 GT, which has very similar power levels at about half the price, 60,000 quid for one of those. And it does worry me that people that maybe haven't ever driven anything spicier than a 2-litre Corsa or something like that could get into a car with that kind of performance potential and not really know what they're doing. This, to give you an example, if you're exiting a junction like that and you're coming out, you put your foot all the way down, it will just pull to the inside of a bend. That's not really a car doing anything wrong, it's just you not realizing what's about to happen because you've asked it to deploy 600 horsepower plus straight away to all 4 wheels, and it just does what you've told it. Yes, this car does have all the crash aversion software that you would expect from a modern day vehicle. In fact, some of it's actually a little bit oddly calibrated because once in the village it thought I was going to crash into a car parked on the other side of the road, and no other vehicle has ever given me a warning at that point in the village. But the rest of the time, actually, it's been totally unintrusive. I've had the lane keep assist off and everything, and this has been a really, really nice car to drive. In fact, from the driver's perspective, it feels refreshingly old school. Yes, I know there's loads and loads and loads of tech in it, and there's loads of stuff going on, computers and differentials and motors all working together, but actually, it really does all come together. It all actually works. It does what it says on the tin. It delivers a really, really good drive. And it's actually a car with some surprising character too. Yeah, sure, it's really, really very fast. That's the RS bit of this car's very confusing name. In fact, I really don't like manufacturers' trends now to just have one sort of sub-brand for their electric cars. It seems pointless. If all your cars are going to be electric, you don't have to call every Audi an e-tron, do you, when they're all going to be electric? But look, let's take a bend like this. I mean, you just hoof round, done, no problem whatsoever. It's a lovely little set of bends here. This thing just turns in so well. You do have to be wary of how much of the road it's taking up, because it is taking up a lot, but it rides beautifully. It's helped, I'm sure, by all-wheel steer as you get in stuff like the RS6 and of course now the Taycan as well. It's actually fairly unintrusive. The car's got a great turning circle. I mean, really will turn on a sixpence, so that's handy. It does somewhat offset its enormous size when you're maneuvering around town and the like. So that's the RS bit kind of covered. But what has really shocked me is this car's GT credentials. And I mean that in the true sense of the word, as a grand tourer, not how Porsche do it with GT being the sporty model. No, this is an excellent mile muncher. Now, I'm sure many of you will already be sharpening your keyboards, ready to tell me how useless every EV must be at covering big distances. Well, I've done over 1,000 miles this week in this car, and in a little bit, I'll tell you just how my experience has been. But as a tool, the car itself, to get from A to B, wonderful. Absolutely brilliant. In terms of long distance comfort, the only things I would like this car to have, which it doesn't, are the massage seats that you get in the Vorsprung and a slightly better stereo. This one's not atrocious, but it could and should be better. I really do like the B&O system with the pop-up tweeters that you've seen in a few cars, Audis, Aston Martins and the like. It's pricey, but it actually is good. Two days this week, I drove this car on a journey that totaled just over 500 miles. Each leg was about 5 hours, including charge time, and this was absolutely superb. The aircon worked very well. The performance was excellent. Even when the battery was low and it was slightly limiting what it could do, it still had more than enough shove. Really very good. Boot space, excellent. I didn't even think to put anything in the front, and there's loads of space up there as well. In truth, it is a car I think much happier on a motorway than being thrown down a country lane, but naturally we're about to do that in a minute. The fact this is electric means it's also inherently very quiet, and that does mean you arrive at your destination genuinely quite relaxed. This car has wireless Android Auto, presumably wireless Apple CarPlay as well, which helps, although frustratingly you've still got to then plug your phone in down here anyway to make it charge, and that was an annoyance. One thing I am slightly upset they haven't introduced to this layout is a way of getting your Android Auto and Google Maps to talk to the display here and tell you what it is you're about to do. When you're on a longer journey and maybe you've been using the different screens over here, you know, the radio or something, and you've forgotten there's a turn coming up soon and you've got the voice down, or you're listening to a different media source, then I think it is quite handy just to have your nav instructions repeated here or on the heads-up display if you have it. And to be honest, the fact this car doesn't have a heads-up display at 135 grand is just nuts. That's just stupid. No need for that, Audi. No need. But let's have a little bit more of that RS side, shall we? As the car doesn't really make any noise, I will choose an appropriate soundtrack. That's the nice thing about this car. It can be or it can be the automotive journalist in me wants to remind you that even the new 1,000+ horsepower Tesla Model S Plaid will still only go around the Nürburgring just about as quickly as a fairly ordinary 300-odd horsepower 911 Carrera. Such is the penalty of having a really, really heavy car. Yes, seriously impressive in a straight line up to 60, 70 or so, but over a lap, they're not actually that quick for the power that they generate. But the realist in me also wants to tell you that that doesn't actually matter, because in the real world, on a road like this, there's very, very little capable of keeping up with something like this. If for no other reason than, yeah, sure, if I drove down here in a Ferrari at like 6,000 RPM all the time, it would also have amazing response and loads of power. But you just don't do that, do you? You don't sit there with the car screaming its head off the whole time. I tried it in a GT3. It gets very, very tiring and quite embarrassing quite quickly. This though, and I'm not really worried about upsetting the neighbours. I can have masses and masses of fun in this. If anything, I'd actually be somewhat worried about people not knowing that you're coming, because you can arrive at a fairly serious rate, I tell you. Whew. Above motorway speeds, eventually physics does begin to overwhelm the car, the weight becomes more important than the power figure and all that, but by the time that happens, you're already going pretty darn quickly. For the vast majority of people, this is going to be one of the fastest things they've ever experienced. And it is for me as well, to be honest. I love it. Absolutely love it. But not a car without fault, the Audi RS E-Tron GT. If you thought this was going to be one extended JayEmm Loves Audi episode, you'd be wrong. There are some flaws. I've discussed a few already, and on the road, a few more become apparent too. First off, and this won't be a surprise to you, the steering. It's light, not really much feel in it, dynamic, it's a little bit heavier, and that's about it. One of the things that I have experienced with this car is, I would say, in the week that I've had this, I've had more tyre squeal than probably the last couple of years of driving combined. And that tells you two things. First off, the RS E-Tron GT gives you the impression of a car that has absolutely unlimited reserves of grip and traction. Secondly, this is a falsehood. There is evidently a point where physics wakes up, intervenes, and tells those good years that there is only so much that they can do. I am actually happy this car has good years on it. The RS6 is fitted with Hankooks by default. An odd choice. There's a nice little bend up here with actually quite a bit of visibility through it, so I may be able to show you just what it is that I'm on about with this tyre squeal nonsense. And yeah, we're clear through. See? Now, it wasn't scary, that wasn't overly dramatic, probably sounded it, but actually it was really quite fine. It was not a problem. The car just slowly does that and tells you that it's probably had enough. I think you're going to go through a lot of tyres if you own one of these and enjoy driving it, I have to say that. Now, reversing and manoeuvring, actually quite nice and easy. Do wish it had a 360 camera. That is another thing that it really should just have and not be an option. As much as I really enjoyed my time with the Kia EV6 GT, and that car offers fantastic value for money, as a driver's tool, this is still much better at getting the business done. It is far more composed, far harder to ruffle its feathers, and just a little easier to pedal. No, a lot easier to pedal. Other things I don't like, well, the big one for me is actually visibility. You've got pretty hefty A-pillars, very large wing mirrors, which for over there do make things very, very obscured, and this B-pillar way too far forward, way too chunky. Your view out the rear is also, well, Lamborghini-like in some ways, and your rear three-quarters visibility is also obscured if you have the seat where most passengers will have the seat. This is not exactly unique to Audi, but the car does seem to be following this very worrying modern trend of making stuff very big, chunky, and presumably safer in an accident, but I think also more likely to cause an accident. So I just had a guess about how you do launch control, and my guess was right. Turn traction control off by holding the button down here for quite a while, put the car in dynamic, hold down the brake somewhere suitable, and you'll then see the power bar go beyond 100%, which is really quite cool, and yeah, you get a very, very effective launch. In fairness, it doesn't feel that much more dramatic than the regular one, which is already very, very impressive. But it's a fine party piece nonetheless. I think that really is the area where this car was a little bit pegged back so it didn't generate the numbers to trouble your Taycan customer. Incidentally, I spoke to one the other day at a charging point, and I was hoping to get some decent real-world information out of them on how they've got on with the charging thing, and it didn't go so well because they told me that obviously the Porsche turns and steers everything a lot better because this has the Audi all-wheel drive system in it. Evidently he's digested a few too many episodes of Top Gear and Evo magazine where all Audis just understeer and are rubbish. I didn't have the heart to tell him they basically got the same all-wheel drive system. And he also told me that the Porsche is quicker because it's quote-unquote a ton lighter. And I don't mean a ton as in, oh yeah, it's a ton better. No, no, he meant an actual ton. Because carbon fiber. That's what he said. The charging experience, well, that's been a bit mixed. So living with this car, I've had to charge it a number of times, and when doing big miles, I do need fast chargers. Let's be honest here, it's a big battery pack, 83 kilowatt hour. The official range is about 283 miles, though I've not actually ever had this to 100%, ever. It still has given me a range of, say, 240, 250 miles, and happily, the prediction in this car is very accurate. Even having fun is decent. Though, annoyingly, the trip computer is frustrating because you get your miles per kilowatt hour figure, and you can get the instantaneous one fairly accurate, but your long or short-term memory will only do it as a whole integer. So it'll give you 2 or 3, or I suppose 4 if you could get it. But there's quite a big difference. There's a massive difference, in fact. That's like a car that only tells you if you're doing 20 miles to the gallon or 50. You sort of need an in-between there. I want to know what my average is. So long term, I'm getting about 3 miles per kilowatt hour, which is also an improvement on the old e-Tron. That did about 1.8 to 2. That was terrible, that car. Really, I don't know how they got it so bad, but it was awful. This, much, much better. 200 plus mile journeys, not a problem. I was supposed to have a faster charging point installed at home, like a little 7 kilowatt charger. That hasn't happened yet. There's been a delay with that. So I've been charging the car at home off of a 3-pin plug, and actually give it a day's worth of charge. It had about 200 miles in it, and I've been doing other stuff this week where I couldn't use this. So actually I've charged it mostly at home, but then on journeys used fast charging points. That's been an interesting experience. In good news, there are loads more than there were the last time I tried to do this, and where they exist, multiple points have been installed. So you're not just finding 2 points at a petrol station anymore, there's 6 or 10 or 12. That's brilliant, and we need that. Unfortunately, the pricing is ridiculously high and also varied. One charge at Peterborough Services at their Ionity point, it didn't cost me anything because it wasn't working properly, it wasn't charging at the full rate. The quickest I had out of this in terms of charge was at Ionity in Milton Keynes, where I got 196 kilowatts going into this at one point. That's a lot of electricity. Of course, one of the problems is that so many numbers around EVs are designed to kind of obfuscate the truth. They like to quote the range when the car is at 100%, but they only like to quote the charging time from 0 to 80%, because that's the quick bit. The 80 to 100% can take nearly just as long, because it can't charge as fast because battery chemistry and all that jazz. So the second charge that I did the following day was I did an MFG somewhere over in the sort of northwest of England, and that cost me £53 for what amounted to about 200 miles worth of range, which compared to, say, Ferrari, very good. GT3 is better than a GT3, certainly at current fuel prices. But compared to anything efficiency orientated, not so great. If you're already running a big diesel, if you had an old diesel A8 or something, you're not going to save a penny by switching to electric. The number of these points also out of commission was somewhat scary. Every single station that I visited had 1 or 2 just not working, and the ones I did visit, Ionity in particular, were so frustrating to use. I'm someone that in the past has built their own computers, so the idea of charging an electric car should really be a simple one. This shouldn't be a difficult task at all, yet it is. Ionity need you to use your phone to sign up to things, and then what the screen says you should do, actually you should ignore, and it's just really frustrating. And I can't help but think that people like my nan are never, ever going to be able to have an electric car. Ever. I was even at Tesco the other day filling up a combustion engine car, and there was somebody there who couldn't understand that you had to press the button to tell it whether you want to pay the cashier or pay at pump. I don't think people like that are going to get on very well with these cars either, but I suppose that's their problem rather than mine. But it should be something that people are thinking about. It should be really, really easy. You should be able to go up to any charge point, tap a contactless card, plug in. It should be that easy. The cost, I mean, is a whole other different debate. That was a shocker. And I'm sure there are loads of people out there who'll tell me, James, you've done it wrong, you've done it wrong. I'm like, well, sorry, when I've got to do 300 miles in a day, when I'm leaving at 7 o'clock in the evening, having been up since 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not going to get to my destination until 2 o'clock, I cannot wait 6 hours to charge the car. I need it charged ASAP. And that's a frustration. But not necessarily all the e-Tron's problem. And as the charging network gets better, I suppose the experience of owning the car will get better. And here's the thing, Would I have one of these over an RS6? Maybe, maybe not. The RS6 is still a very, very practical car and a lot of fun, and I quite like the new one. Didn't initially, but I really do. RS7 though, oh yeah. And I tell you the real shocker, if I had to go up to Scotland right now and I could take either this or a Bentley Continental GT, I'd take the Audi. I really, really would. For the simple reason, this is comfortable, this is enjoyable, and when I get to Scotland, the roads are not very good. The Bentley is shockingly poorly damped. If Bentley could make a car a bit like this, but with a much nicer interior, I'll be giving them a call, because that I might like to spec up. And if that's not high praise, I don't know what is. RS E-Tron GT, you know what? Is it quite as brilliant as the Taycan to drive? No, maybe falls just a touch short. But so short, I don't think it really matters. Neither were the ultimate driving machine, and in many, many ways, looks, interior, I kind of prefer this. I'd just like Audi to give us all the options they already give to other markets. That's it. That's an Audi GB problem, isn't it, really, rather than an Audi problem? But there we go. That is the RS E-Tron GT. It's actually one of my favourite electric cars, and I think of the moment, it might be my favourite Audi. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Big thank you to Audi for sending me the car for a week, to you for watching, and as ever, don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and even if you have, make sure you've pressed the bell icon so you'll be notified of every new video release. I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.